The ship screamed as it fell through the purple sky. Zarathul gripped the controls with all four of her arms, but nothing worked anymore. The electromagnetic storm had killed her navigation systems first, then the engines, and now the emergency power was failing too. Her crystalline skin caught the flashing red lights of the cockpit as alarms blared around her. The Catherian survey ship had been state-of-the-art when she left the homeworld 3 days ago. Now it was just expensive metal falling toward the rocky surface of this forgotten moon. The crash came hard and fast. Metal screamed against stone as the ship carved a deep scar across the barren landscape. Zarathul felt her safety harness cut into her shoulders as the world spun around her. When everything finally stopped moving, smoke was already filling the cabin. She had maybe 5 minutes before the fuel cells exploded. Moving faster than she ever had in her life, Zarathul grabbed her emergency pack and stumbled toward the escape hatch. Her legs shook as she climbed out of the wreckage. The ship's hull was already glowing red-hot in several places. The storm hit her like a physical blow. Wind strong enough to knock over trees grabbed her lightweight body and nearly threw her back against the burning ship. Rain fell in thick drops that hissed when they hit the ground. This wasn't normal water. The scanners had warned her about the acidic precipitation on this moon. Each drop that hit her emergency suit left tiny burn marks. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, turning the dark landscape bright white for terrifying moments. In those flashes, Zarathul could see the truth of this place. Rocky hills stretched in every direction. No trees, no plants, no shelter anywhere. Except for one thing. About 200 meters away, built into the side of a low hill, something that looked like a door. The structure around it was crude, just metal sheets bolted together and sealed with some kind of foam. It looked like the work of primitives, but right now it was the only hope she had. The explosion behind her made the decision easy. Her ship's fuel cells went up in a ball of orange fire that lit up the whole valley. The blast wave knocked her forward, and she ran toward the shelter as burning pieces of her vessel rained down around her. The wind fought her every step. 3 times she fell to her knees as gusts tried to blow her away. The acid rain was eating through her suit faster now. She could see the outer layer starting to dissolve. Once it reached her skin, she would have minutes to live. The door was real, made of thick metal with simple hinges. It looked like something from a museum, but when she grabbed the handle and pulled, it opened easily. Zarathul threw herself inside and slammed it shut behind her. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of her own breathing. The storm became a distant howl outside the thick walls. She was alive. Her suit's emergency light slowly came on, showing her a space about 4 meters square carved right into the rock. Then she saw the figure sitting by a small fire. At first, her mind refused to accept what her 4 eyes were telling her. It had to be a mistake, some kind of statue or maybe a broken maintenance robot. But then the figure moved, turning to look at her with 2 pale eyes that reflected the firelight. A human. Every story she had ever heard about humans came flooding back. The Deathworlders who conquered their poisonous planet through pure violence. The species that never learned to cooperate, only to dominate. The beings so dangerous that the Galactic Hegemony had voted to limit their expansion beyond their home system. Humans were killers. Everyone knew that. They came from a world where everything tried to kill everything else, and they had learned to kill better than anything else in the galaxy. Their own history was nothing but war after war. They couldn't even make peace with their own species, let alone with aliens. And now she was trapped in a small space with one of them. The human was smaller than she had expected. The stories always made them sound like giants, but this one was only a little taller than her, though much broader across the shoulders. Its skin was darker than she had imagined, and its black hair was starting to show gray at the edges. It wore simple clothes, just fabric with no armor or weapons visible. But Zarathul knew that humans didn't need weapons to kill. Their bare hands were strong enough to crush Catherian bones. The human said something in its harsh language, but her translator was struggling. The electromagnetic interference from the storm was making it hard for the device to work properly. All she caught were fragments, "safe now," and "help." Help? That had to be wrong. Humans didn't help other species. They conquered them. She pressed herself against the far wall, as far from the creature as she could get. Her emergency suit was still failing, its outer layer dissolving more with each drop of acid rain it had absorbed. But better to die slowly from exposure than quickly from human violence. The human stood up slowly, and Zarathul's heart started beating even faster. This was it. This was when it would show its true nature. Every muscle in her body tensed, ready to fight even though she knew it was hopeless. But the human just raised both of its hands, palms facing toward her. It spoke again, and this time her translator caught more words. No harm, safe, help you. The creature moved very slowly toward a pile of equipment in the corner. Zarathul watched its every movement, ready to run back into the storm if necessary. But the human just picked up a small device and brought it closer to the fire, so she could see it clearly. It was a medical scanner, old and battered, but definitely designed for treating multiple species. The human held it up, pointing at her damaged suit, then at the scanner. It was trying to tell her something about helping with her injuries. This made no sense. Everything the hegemony had taught her said that humans were monsters. They were supposed to shoot first and never ask questions. They were supposed to see other species as either threats to eliminate or resources to exploit. But this human was offering medical aid to a complete stranger from a species that had never shown humans any kindness. The translator finally started, working better as the storm moved away from directly overhead. The human's next words came through clearly. Your suit is damaged. The acid rain got through. I can help fix it if you let me. Zarathul looked down at herself. The human was right. She could see several spots where the acid had eaten completely through the outer layer. Soon it would reach her skin, and then she really would die. Her own people wouldn't arrive to rescue her for days if they came at all. Standard hegemony protocol was to avoid unnecessary risks. She had a choice. Trust the monster or die slowly in this cave. The human seemed to understand her fear. It backed away from her, giving her space, and sat down by the fire again. Take your time, it said through the translator. The storm will last for hours. You're safe here. Safe, with a human. The words didn't make sense together. But as the wind howled outside and her suit continued to fail, Zarathul began to wonder if everything she had been taught about humans might be wrong. Marcus Chen had been alone on this moon for 3 years, 2 months and 16 days. Not that he was counting. Much. He'd built the shelter himself using salvaged materials from previous survey teams and techniques his grandfather had taught him about surviving in harsh places. The old man had been a miner on Luna back when that was still dangerous work, and he'd passed down a lot of useful knowledge about staying alive where nothing else could. When the Catherian burst through his door, Marcus knew exactly what species she was. The forearms and crystal-like skin were unmistakable. He'd studied xenobiology before switching to geology, and Catherians were one of the more well-documented species in the galaxy. Known for being brilliant scientists, terrified of contamination, and absolutely convinced that humans were the most dangerous thing in the universe. The fear in her 4 eyes was so intense it was almost painful to see. She pressed herself against the wall like a trapped animal, her whole body shaking. Her translator was spitting out rapid clicks and whistles that his own device struggled to interpret, but he didn't need a translation to understand terror. Marcus had seen that look before. 3 years ago, right before the mining accident that had killed 6 people and driven him to this isolated moon to live like a hermit. The look of someone who thought they were about to die. His first instinct was to move slowly and speak softly. That was what you did with frightened animals, and right now this alien wasn't thinking like a scientist. She was pure panic wrapped in a failing environmental suit. It's okay, he said, keeping his voice low and calm. You're safe here. The storm can't get in. Her translator was clearly having problems. The electromagnetic interference from the storm was probably scrambling its circuits. He could see her suit sparking in several places where acid rain had eaten through the outer layer. If he didn't help her soon, she was going to die right here in his shelter. But first he had to convince her he wasn't going to kill her. Marcus raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal peace gesture. Most species seemed to understand it, though with Catherians you never knew. Their culture was so different from human norms that simple gestures could mean completely different things. I'm Marcus, he said, pointing to himself. Human. But I'm not going to hurt you. The alien's eyes went even wider if that was possible. Apparently identifying himself as human wasn't helping his case. He tried a different approach. Moving very slowly, Marcus picked up his medical scanner and held it where she could see it. The device was old but reliable, designed to work on multiple species. He'd bought it years ago when he was still part of a mixed-species research team, back before the accident changed everything. "Your suit is damaged," he said, pointing at the obvious holes in her protective gear. "I can help fix it." She said something in her own language that her broken translator turned into static. But her body language was clear enough. She didn't trust him at all. Fair enough. If the positions were reversed, Marcus probably wouldn't trust a random Catherian either. The problem was that her suit really was failing. Acid rain from this moon's storms could eat through most materials given enough time, and her emergency gear wasn't designed for prolonged exposure. She had maybe an hour before the damage reached her skin, and Catherian biology couldn't handle the kind of chemical burns that would cause. Marcus decided to try leading by example. He walked over to his supply cabinet and pulled out a packet of suit repair foam. The stuff was designed to work on any standard environmental suit, regardless of which species made it. Basic emergency equipment that any smart person carried when working in hazardous conditions. He held up the packet so she could see it, then very slowly approached her damaged suit. When she tensed up, he stopped and backed away again. "I know you're scared," Marcus said. "I know what your people think about humans, but I'm just a geologist who wants to help. That's all." This time her translator caught most of it. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could practically see her mind working. Death from acid burns versus trusting a human. Not exactly a great choice from her perspective. Finally, she spoke in careful, slow words that her damaged translator managed to handle. "Why would you help me? Your species gains nothing from Catherian survival." The question hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. Why was he helping her? The smart thing would be to let her fix her own suit and stay as far away as possible. Catherians were notorious for reporting any contact with humans to the galactic hegemony, and those reports never said anything good. But looking at her terror-filled eyes, Marcus remembered something his grandfather used to say. "When someone needs help, you help them. Everything else is just politics." "Because you need help," Marcus said simply, "and I can provide it. That's enough." She tilted her head in a gesture he'd learned meant confusion in Catherian body language. Apparently the concept of helping someone just because they needed it was foreign to her. That said a lot about what her species thought of humans. The wind outside howled louder, and Marcus saw her suit spark again. She was running out of time to make this decision. "Look," he said, sitting down cross-legged on the floor to make himself less threatening. "I'm going to put the repair foam here between us. You can take it and fix the suit yourself if you want. I won't come any closer." He placed the packet halfway between them and scooted back to give her plenty of space. Then he waited. Catherians were logical beings, smart enough to build faster-than-light ships and energy weapons that could crack planets. She had to know that her current situation was unsustainable. Fear was keeping her frozen, but intelligence would eventually win out. It took 5 minutes. 5 minutes of watching her internal struggle play out across her alien features. 5 minutes of listening to the storm rage outside while her suit continued to fail. Finally, she moved. Quick as lightning, she darted forward, grabbed the repair foam, and retreated to her corner. Her forehands worked with surprising skill, spreading the foam over the damaged areas of her suit. The material hardened quickly, sealing the holes and stopping the ongoing chemical damage. When she was done, she looked at Marcus with something that wasn't quite trust, but wasn't pure terror anymore either. "You could have taken advantage of my weakness," she said through her now functioning translator. "Catherians are not physically strong. You could have overpowered me easily." Marcus shrugged. "Could have. Didn't want to." "There's a difference." She stared at him for a long moment. "I do not understand humans. Most of the time, neither do we," Marcus admitted. "But we figure it out as we go along." Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, a human and a Catherian sat by a small fire, both of them trying to understand what had just happened. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The storm lasted 3 days. Zarathul had never experienced anything like it. On her homeworld, weather was controlled and predictable. Even on the frontier worlds where the hegemony conducted surveys, they had technology to predict and avoid dangerous conditions. But this moon seemed to follow no rules at all. The human, Marcus he had called himself, seemed completely unbothered by their situation. He moved around the small shelter like he owned it, which Zarathul supposed he did. Everything here was clearly his work. The carved-out sleeping area, the simple cooking setup, the careful arrangement of supplies and equipment. What amazed her most was how he lived without any of the safety equipment she considered essential. He breathed the recycled air without filters. He drank water straight from a container without running it through purification systems. He even ate food that would probably kill her if she tried it. "How do you survive like this?" she asked on the second day, watching him prepare another meal of things that looked poisonous. Marcus looked up from the small pot he was stirring over the fire. "What do you mean?" "No environmental controls. No safety systems. No protection from contamination." She gestured at his simple clothes. "You are not even wearing protective gear." He smiled, an expression that still made her nervous even though she was starting to understand it meant friendliness rather than aggression. "I guess I don't need as much protection as you do. Humans are pretty tough." That was an understatement. Over the past 2 days, Zarathul had watched him do things that would kill most species. He slept directly on the rock floor without any cushioning. He stuck his bare hand into the fire to adjust the burning wood. When a small leak developed in the shelter's roof, he went outside into the acid rain wearing nothing but a simple coat, and fixed it in minutes. "Your species evolved on a death world," she said. It wasn't a question. Everyone in the galaxy knew that much about humans. "Earth's not that bad," Marcus said. "Sure, it tries to kill you sometimes, but you learn to deal with it. Besides, it's beautiful too. Oceans bigger than continents. Mountains that reach into space. Weather that can level cities or bring life to deserts." The way he described it made Earth sound like a nightmare and a paradise at the same time. Zarathul tried to imagine growing up in a place where the environment itself was hostile, where survival required constant adaptation and strength. "Is that why your people are so—" She searched for a diplomatic way to phrase it. "Violent?" Marcus finished. "Aggressive? Dangerous?" She nodded, embarrassed at being so direct. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, stirring his pot. "Maybe. When everything around you is trying to kill you, you learn to fight back. But you also learn other things, such as how to help each other, how to share resources when they're scarce, how to work together when the alternative is everyone dying." He looked at her directly. "What do your people think humans are like?" Zarathul hesitated. The truth would probably offend him, but he had been honest with her. "We are taught that humans are naturally aggressive, that you solve problems through violence, that you cannot be trusted because you will always choose conflict over cooperation." "And what do you think now?" She looked around the shelter. Everything here spoke of careful planning and patient work. Marcus had carved this place out of solid rock using simple tools. He had built systems to provide clean air, fresh water, and protection from the elements. Most importantly, he had shared all of it with a complete stranger from a species that considered him an enemy. "I think," she said slowly, "that perhaps we do not understand humans very well." Marcus laughed, a sound that had frightened her at first but now seemed warm and genuine. "To be fair, we don't understand you either. The hegemony doesn't exactly encourage cultural exchange." That was true. The galactic hegemony was an alliance of older, more established species. They had been exploring space for thousands of years before humans even invented writing. When humanity burst onto the galactic scene with their crude but effective technology, the hegemony had been unwelcoming. "Your people are excluded from most scientific expeditions," Zarathul admitted. "The Council says humans are too unpredictable for joint research. Yet here you are in a shelter built by human hands, saved by human technology," Marcus pointed out. "Seems like we're not that bad at the science thing." She had to admit he was right. The shelter was crude by hegemony standards, but it worked perfectly. More than that, it was comfortable. Marcus had thought of things that pure engineering couldn't account for. The placement of the fire to provide both heat and light, the arrangement of sleeping areas to maximize privacy, the small touches that made a cave feel like a home. "Why do you live alone out here?" she asked. "This does not seem like a normal human settlement." Marcus's expression darkened. "I used to work with a mixed species research team. Humans, Catherians, Altarians, even a few vegan traders. We were mapping mineral deposits in the Kepler system. What happened? I made a mistake." His voice was quiet now, almost lost in the sound of the storm outside. "Misread some geological data. Recommended a drilling site that turned out to be unstable. When they started extracting ore, the whole shaft collapsed." Zarathul felt her skin go cold. "How many died?" 6, 3 humans, 2 Catherians, 1 Altarian. Marcus stared into the fire. The official investigation cleared me of any wrongdoing. Said it was an unforeseeable accident. But I knew better. If I had been more careful, more thorough, those people would still be alive. So you came here, so I came here. Figured I could do less damage by myself. He looked at her. Funny how that worked out. Zarathul understood now why he had helped her without question. Marcus Chen was a man carrying guilt, trying to balance the scales by saving a life instead of accidentally taking them. But there was more to it than that. She had seen how he worked, how he thought through problems. He wasn't just helping her out of guilt. He was helping because it was who he was. The people who died, she said carefully. Would they want you to spend your life alone on this moon? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Probably not. Kara, one of the Catherians, used to say that isolation was just fear wearing a fancy name. She sounds wise. She was. They all were. Good people doing important work. He looked at Zarathul. What about you? What brings a hegemony survey commander to this forgotten rock? Routine geological survey. The same kind of work you used to do, actually. She gestured at the walls around them. Though I am beginning to think this moon is not as routine as our briefings suggested. Nothing about this place is routine, Marcus agreed. The storms follow patterns that don't match any meteorological models. The mineral deposits are unlike anything in the standard databases, and the electromagnetic interference plays havoc with most technology. But not yours. Human tech is built to work under bad conditions. We learned a long time ago that sophisticated systems fail when you need them most. Sometimes simple and reliable beats complex and fragile. As if to prove his point, Zarathul's suit status display flickered and went dark. The storm was still interfering with her equipment, but Marcus's simple shelter continued to provide perfect protection. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. But inside, warmed by the fire and protected by human engineering, Zarathul felt safer than she had since leaving her homeworld. For the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand that maybe the galaxy had been wrong about humans. On the fourth day, everything changed. Zarathul woke to the sound of her emergency beacon finally cutting through the electromagnetic interference. After 3 days of silence, her ship's distress signal was reaching space again. Relief flooded through her as she activated her communication system. This is Commander Zarathul of the survey ship, Crystalline Dawn, emergency beacon active, requesting immediate extraction. The response came within minutes. Commander, this is Captain Veltar aboard the rescue vessel Silent Approach. We have your position. What is your status? Alive and uninjured. Ship destroyed and crash landing. Currently sheltering from electromagnetic storm. There was a pause. Commander, we're reading massive seismic activity building in your region. The storm has destabilized the moon's crust. You have perhaps 2 hours before catastrophic geological failure. Zarathul felt her hope crumble. Can you extract me before then? Negative. The electromagnetic interference prevents safe landing or teleportation. Standard protocol requires us to maintain safe distance until conditions improve. How long will that take? Another pause, longer this time. Geological models suggest the region will be uninhabitable for several months. I'm sorry, Commander. The communication ended. Zarathul stared at her equipment, trying to process what she'd just heard. The hegemony was abandoning her. It was logical, efficient, and completely in line with standard procedures. One life against the safety of an entire rescue crew. The mathematics were simple, but she was still going to die. Marcus had been listening to the entire conversation through her translator. Now he was studying readouts on his own equipment, his face grim. They're right about the seismic activity, he said. I'm seeing stress fractures developing all through this region. The storm did more damage than just electromagnetic interference. So we both die here, Zarathul said quietly. Maybe. Marcus was moving around the shelter, gathering equipment. Or maybe not. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out a collection of salvaged electronics, parts from both their ships, tools from his workshop, components that looked like they'd been scavenged from a dozen different sources. Your people's technology is precise, right? Elegant solutions that work perfectly under controlled conditions. Yes. And my people's technology is crude but reliable, built to function when everything goes wrong. Zarathul watched him start connecting components in ways that made no engineering sense. What are you doing? Building a hybrid beacon. Catherian precision guided by human stubbornness. He held up a crystalline matrix from her ship's communication array, This can generate a signal that will cut through electromagnetic interference like a knife. But it needs perfect conditions to work, which we do not have. Right, but if I pair it with human signal boosters and some very illegal modification, Marcus was already welding connections with a plasma torch. I might be able to create something that works despite the interference. That is impossible. The resonance frequencies would be completely incompatible. Marcus grinned. An expression that Zarathul was learning meant he was about to do something dangerous and probably insane. Impossible is just another word for hasn't been tried yet. He worked with the focused intensity she was beginning to recognize as uniquely human. When Catherians approached a problem, they planned carefully, consulted databases, ran simulations. Marcus just started building and figured out the details as he went along. This violates about 12 safety protocols, Zarathul said, watching him jury-rig power systems that were never meant to work together. Probably 15, Marcus agreed. But safety protocols are written for normal situations. This isn't normal. The ground shook beneath them, a low rumble that spoke of massive forces building deep underground. Dust fell from the ceiling of the shelter. They had less time than the rescue ship had estimated. Even if this works, Zarathul said, the signal will only be strong enough for one teleportation lock. Your rescue ship cannot transport 2 people simultaneously through this interference. Marcus's hands never stopped working. I know. Then you are building this for me. I'm building this because it needs to be built. The simplicity of his answer stunned her. Marcus wasn't calculating odds or weighing options. He wasn't thinking about the political implications or the logical outcomes. He was just doing what needed to be done, another tremor, stronger this time. Somewhere in the distance, rocks were falling. This is illogical, Zarathul said. You gain nothing from saving me. Your species gains nothing. The hegemony will still consider humans dangerous. My report will change nothing. Maybe. Maybe not. Marcus attached the final connections and powered up the hybrid device. It sparked, hummed, and settled into a steady rhythm that seemed to pulse with the electromagnetic activity around them. But right now, logic isn't the point. Doing the right thing is the point. Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why would you sacrifice yourself for someone whose people have treated yours with nothing but suspicion and contempt? Marcus stopped working and looked at her directly. Because 3 years ago I made a mistake that killed 6 people. Good people who trusted me. I've been living with that ever since, wondering if I could have done better. Been better. This will not bring them back. No. But maybe it will prove that humans can be more than just the sum of our mistakes. He turned back to the beacon. Maybe it will prove that we're worth taking a chance on. The ground shook again, hard enough to knock equipment off the shelves. Through the walls of the shelter they could hear the ominous sound of splitting rock. Signals ready, Marcus announced. It should cut through the interference for about 30 seconds. Long enough for one transport. Zarathul looked at the beacon, then at Marcus, then at the communicator that would call her rescue ship. I cannot do this. Sure you can. You're a hegemony officer. Following orders is what you do. The order was to conduct a geological survey. I never received orders to abandon allies to save myself. Marcus stared at her. I'm not your ally. I'm just some human you met in a cave. No, Zarathul said firmly. You are the being who saved my life, shared your shelter, and is now building a way for me to escape certain death. If that does not make you an ally, then the word has no meaning. The beacon was ready. The rescue ship was waiting. And the moon was coming apart around them. Zarathul made a decision that would have horrified her instructors at the academy. She grabbed Marcus with 2 of her forearms and activated the beacon with the other 2. What are you doing? Marcus shouted over the sudden whine of the transport beam. Something unprecedented, Zarathul said as the world dissolved around them. I am improvising. The teleportation beam materialized them in the cargo bay of the Catherian rescue ship. Alarms immediately started blaring as the ship's contamination sensors detected an unfiltered human presence. Emergency quarantine protocols activated. The ship's computer announced in the calm voice that Catherians used for disasters. Unknown biological contamination detected. Sealing cargo bay. Captain Veltar's voice crackled over the intercom, sharp with panic. Commander Zarathul, step away from the contamination source immediately. We are implementing emergency sterilization procedures. Belay that order, Zarathul said firmly. still holding on to Marcus as he looked around the sterile metal walls with obvious discomfort. The human is not a contamination source. He is my rescuer. Dead silence from the bridge. Zarathul could practically hear the crew's minds trying to process what she had just said. In 3,000 years of hegemony history, no one had ever voluntarily transported a human onto a Cytherian vessel. "Commander," Captain Veltar said carefully, "please confirm that you have not been subjected to human mind control techniques." "There are no human mind control techniques," Zarathul replied, fighting the urge to laugh. "Captain, I am declaring this human to be under my personal protection as an allied researcher. Emergency powers Article 7 of the Hegemony Charter." More silence. Article 7 was almost never invoked and never for humans, but it did give field commanders the authority to grant temporary allied status to individuals who provided critical assistance during emergencies. "Commander," came a new voice, "the ship's science officer. Our sensors show massive geological failure occurring on the moon's surface. The entire region where you were sheltered has collapsed." Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. "Good timing." "Yes," Zarathul agreed. "Very good timing." The quarantine field finally powered down and Captain Veltar entered the cargo bay with a full security escort. The captain was older than Zarathul, his crystalline skin showing the deep blue colors that came with age and experience. His 4 eyes took in Marcus with obvious suspicion. "Commander, explain yourself." Over the next hour, Zarathul told the entire story: the crash, the storm, Marcus's shelter, and the improvised beacon that had saved both their lives. She spoke clearly and officially, making sure every word would be recorded in the ship's logs. Captain Veltar listened without interrupting, but his expression grew more troubled with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "This human," he said finally, "willingly risked his life to save a Cytherian officer?" "He was prepared to sacrifice his life," Zarathul corrected. "I chose not to let him. By violating quarantine protocols and emergency transportation procedures, by exercising field judgment in an unprecedented situation." The captain looked at Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange. "Human, is Commander Zarathul's account accurate?" Marcus nodded. "More or less. Though she's being modest about her own contributions, it was her decision to grab me during transport that saved my life." "Why did you help her?" The question that had puzzled Zarathul for days. She watched Marcus consider his answer. "Because she needed help," Marcus said simply. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because maybe it was time someone proved that humans and Cytherians could work together, instead of just being afraid of each other." Captain Veltar exchanged glances with his security team. Zarathul could see them trying to reconcile this calm, thoughtful person with everything they'd been taught about human nature. "The Hegemony Council will want a full report," the captain said finally. "They will have one," Zarathul promised. "Along with my recommendation." "Which is?" "That we have been wrong about humans. That our fear has blinded us to opportunities for cooperation. That beings capable of the ingenuity and selflessness I witnessed should be partners, not pariahs." The journey back to Hegemony space took 6 days. During that time, Zarathul watched her crew gradually warm to Marcus's presence. His genuine curiosity about Cytherian technology, combined with his ability to suggest improvements based on human engineering principles, won over even the most suspicious officers. By the 3rd day, Marcus was helping the engineering team optimize their power distribution systems. By the 5th day, he was sharing meals with the crew and answering their endless questions about human culture. "Your species," Science Officer Ketvar said during one of these sessions, "seems to approach problems very differently than we do." "How so?" Marcus asked. "We plan extensively before acting. We consider all variables, run simulations, consult historical databases. You seem to simply begin." Marcus thought about that. "Maybe it's because our homeworld didn't give us time for perfect solutions. When a hurricane is coming, you don't spend days planning the ideal shelter. You build the best one you can with what you have and you improve it as you go. But surely this leads to many failures." "Oh, definitely. We fail a lot. But we also learn from those failures and try again. Sometimes the crazy solution that shouldn't work is the only one that does." Zarathul found herself taking detailed notes on these conversations. The council would need to understand not just what had happened, but why it mattered. When they finally reached the Hegemony station at Kepler Prime, Word of their unusual passenger had already spread. The docking bay was filled with officials, scientists, and security personnel, all waiting to see the human who had somehow ended up on a Cytherian rescue ship. As they prepared to disembark, Marcus turned to Zarathul. "What happens now?" "Now I write a report that will probably cause the biggest political debate in hegemony history," she said. "And you get to be the first human ever to address the Galactic Council." Marcus looked nervous for the first time since she'd met him. "I'm not much of a public speaker. You do not need to be. Just tell them what you told me. Tell them about the shelter you built, the beacon you created, the choice you made to help a stranger." She paused. "Tell them that humans are more than their fears have led them to believe." 6 months later, the first joint human Cytherian research expedition launched toward the Vega system. Their mission? To explore worlds too dangerous for conventional survey teams, using a combination of human adaptability and Cytherian precision. Marcus Chen served as the expedition's chief geologist. Commander Zarathul was the mission commander. Together, they had proven that sometimes the best solutions came from combining different strengths rather than avoiding different weaknesses. The ship they traveled in was itself a hybrid. Cytherian elegance enhanced by human engineering, beautiful and functional and completely unprecedented. As they approached their first target world, a planet where massive ion storms would challenge the most advanced technologies, both commanders felt ready for whatever impossible problems awaited them. After all, they had learned something valuable in that small shelter during the storm. When beings from different worlds worked together, when they shared their strengths and trusted each other's judgment, they could accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers, but it was also full of possibilities that opened up when people chose cooperation over fear. And sometimes that choice began with something as simple as sharing shelter from a storm.